Hello everyone, welcome to Howstuffinmycarworks channel. In today's video, we will show you how to fix the rear differential carrier gasket oil leak common in 2016 and 2017 Toyota Tacoma pickups. It is important to repair this leak before the differential gets damaged from the lack of lubrication. To get started, raise the truck with a floor jack and place 2 jack stands under the rear differential and 2 under the frame close to the front of the truck to keep it level. Place a clean container under the rear differential, remove the drain plug, and wait till all the gear oil has been drained. Once all the gear oil has been drained, install the drain plug with a new gasket and torque it to 36 foot-pounds. The following is a very crucial step. You need to measure the amount of gear oil that was drained. If there was less than 2 liters, it is very likely that the differential carrier has suffered damage due to the poor lubrication and it will need to be replaced. If there was more than 2 liters of gear oil still in the differential, it's very likely that the differential is okay. You still need to inspect it just to make sure after you remove it. If your differential had less than 2 liters, it is wise to reorder a new differential carrier just to make sure. And you need to know the gear ratio. To do so, you need to locate the tag on the side of the differential carrier that is shown in the image. The 2 most common gear ratios in these trucks are 390 and 430. The one you see on the image is 021, and that is for the 390 gear ratio. If the number was 023 instead, that would mean that it's a 430 gear ratio. If the label is missing or is not legible for whatever reason, another way to know the gear ratio is to divide the number of teeth on the ring gear by the number of teeth in the pinion gear. This of course can only be done after you remove the differential carrier. Your local dealership can also provide the correct gear ratio with the VIN number of the truck. Paint a mark on the drive shaft and the differential so they can be aligned again after the job is complete. Remove 3 of the 4 nuts and bolts that hold the drive shaft to the differential and leave the last one finger tight. Next step, loosen the nuts and bolts that fasten the carrier bearing so they can be removed soon by hand. If your truck is a 4-wheel drive, mark the relationship of the drive shaft to the transfer case yoke. Remove 3 of the 4 nuts and leave the last one finger tight. Last step, remove the drive shaft by removing the last bolt and nut at the differential. Hold the driveline with one hand, followed by the 2 carrier bearing bolts, and at this point you need to hold the drive shaft so it doesn't fall. And last, remove the last bolt and nut at the transfer case, remove the drive shaft and set it aside. If your truck is a 2-wheel drive, all you have to do is slide the drive shaft out of the transmission, and to avoid losing transmission fluid, you will need to slide an extension housing plug, and the Nissan part number is 09325-40010. Remove the rear wheels, make sure that the parking brake is not applied, remove the brake drums, and proceed to remove the front brake shoe return spring from the brake shoe. Next, remove the return spring. Remove the front brake shoe hold down cup, spring, and pin, followed by removing the parking brake shoe strut and tension spring. Remove the front brake shoe. Next, remove the automatic adjust lever from the front brake shoe. Here's some advice for you. Try to keep these items on the floor, mimicking the location that they had on the truck. That way when you're ready to install them back on, it'll be a lot easier for you. Remove the rear brake shoe hold down cup, spring, and pin. Disconnect the parking brake cable from the rear brake shoe and finish removing the rear brake shoe. Remove the 2 bolts from the parking cable bracket at the back side of the backing plate and pull the parking brake cable from the backing plate. Disconnect the speed sensors. Remove the cap from the master cylinder reservoir. Then cover the cavity with duct tape or any other strong tape to create an airtight seal and diminish the brake fluid loss when the brake lines are disconnected at the wheel cylinders. Next, place a drain pan under the wheel cylinder and disconnect the brake lines from the wheel cylinder. Plug the brake line either with a vacuum line plug or a piece of hose with a screw at the end to keep the brake fluid from leaking. And of course you need to do this on both sides. Remove the 4 nuts from the bearing retainer and pull the shaft and backing plate from the differential and set it aside. And of course you need to do this on both sides. Remove 9 of the 10 nuts and washers that fasten the differential carrier to the axle housing and leave the last one finger tight. Next, hold the carrier with one hand while you remove the last nut, that way it won't fall on you. Detach the differential carrier from the axle housing and remove it from the vehicle. If it feels like it's stuck and it doesn't want to separate, just use a pry bar or a screwdriver. Once you have removed the differential carrier from the truck, inspect the gears and bearings for damage. Before installing the new differential carrier, make sure you remove all the gasket material from the axle housing. And if you're installing the old carrier, make sure you remove all the gaskets from it also. Next, apply a light coat of high torque gray RTV to the axle housing and install a new gasket. Next, apply a light coat of the same gray RTV to the differential carrier, slide it over the studs on the housing. Install the new style of nuts and washers and torque them to the torque sequence shown in the image. You need to do it in 2 steps. The first step is 18 foot-pounds, and the second and last step is 28 foot-pounds. It's very important not to reuse the old nuts and washers because their torque spec is different. You can identify them by looking at the image. Remove the old axle seals on both sides of the axle housing. Install new seals and new O-rings. Coat the inner lip of the axle seals with gear oil or a light coat of grease to avoid damaging them when you install the axles back on. Next, install the axle shafts with the backing plates back on, but as you do it, make sure that you keep them centered, because if you don't keep them centered as you slide them in, you run the risk of applying too much pressure on the new seals, and this of course will damage them, creating an axle shaft leak. So you don't want to do that. Make sure you're very careful when you slide them back in. Once they're all the way in, install the 4 retaining nuts on both sides and tighten them to 33 foot-pounds. Connect the brake lines back to the wheel cylinders and tighten them to 11 foot-pounds. Next, install the brake shoes and the related components in the reverse order that they were removed. Remove the old brake drum gasket material from the axle flange and the brake drum. Clean the brake drum with brake cleaner, install a new gasket, and install the brake drum back on. Repeat it on both sides. To be able to adjust the brake shoes correctly, install the lug nuts so they can hold the brake drum in place. Next, remove the access plug from the backing plate. Turn the adjuster to expand the brake shoes until the brake drum cannot be turned by hand anymore. Next, release the adjuster 15 notches and reinstall the rubber plug. Next, pull the parking brake lever with a force of about 45 pounds and there should be about 5 to 7 clicks. Release the parking brake and make sure that the brake drum can be turned by hand. Once all the components have been installed, remove the differential fuel plug and fill the differential with 75W85 GL5 synthetic gear oil. The capacity on the rear differential is 4.2 quarts. Once you have filled the differential to the mark shown on the image, install the drain plug with a new gasket back on and tighten it to 36 foot-pounds. Remove the tape that you installed on the brake fluid reservoir and add brake fluid if needed, and proceed to bleed the brakes, starting from the right rear wheel, followed by the left rear. After all the air has been bled, fill the reservoir to the full mark and install the cap back on. On 2-wheel drive models, remove the extension housing plug from the transmission, coat the lip of the seal with transmission fluid, and slide the drive shaft back in. On 4-wheel drive models, align the marks and install the 4 nuts and washers and leave them finger tight. Next, install the carrier bearing bolts and nuts, but leave them finger tight for now. Align the paint mark of the drive shaft and the differential and install the 4 nuts and bolts and leave them finger tight. Next, tighten the bolts in 2 stages. The first one, tighten them at 40 foot-pounds, and the final step, 65 foot-pounds. If your truck is 2-wheel drive, you only need to do this at the rear axle. If it's 4-wheel drive, you need to do this at the transfer case also. Adjust the carrier bearing and tighten the 2 bolts to 27 foot-pounds. And the final step is to install the rear wheels and tighten the lug nuts to 83 foot-pounds. Lower your truck to the ground, take it for a test drive, and when you come back, inspect it for leaks. You shouldn't have any leaks either at the differential carrier or at the axle shafts if you did everything correctly. Plus, if you bled the brakes correctly, your brake pedal should feel normal and not spongy. And there you have it, my dear friends. Those are the steps needed to repair the rear differential carrier oil leak common on 2016 and 2017 Toyota Tacoma. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.